When you're dividing with fractions, one way to look at them is to look at them in terms of a ratio. So this first expression right here can be seen as 2 divided by 1/2 or 2 to 1/2. And we can write that for each of the following ones as well, just rewriting the division problems as if they were ratios. And this just, I think, reflects a different way of viewing division. We could look at this first expression as how many 1/2s are there in 2 whole pieces, and that's true. Or we can look at it as for every 2 whole pieces we have, we also have 1/2. And if I put some context to this, it might help us understand it. I think one easy setup might be to think, okay, so I have 2 cans of paint, right? Each of these whole numbers can represent cans of paint. It's just one context that works, and I think this one works nicely. So you have cans of paint, and when you use the paint, right, these fractions can represent how much of the wall is being covered by that paint. So here, if we use 2 cans of paint, it covers half of the wall. So that half represents the portion of the wall covered, or painted, we'll say. And what this allows us to do, I think, is to really play with these numbers in an intuitive way. So 2 cans of paint covers 1/2 of the wall. So the question is, how many cans of paint would you need to cover an entire wall? And that really is a question in division, right? In other words, how many 1/2s are there in a whole wall? So that means we need 4 cans of paint, right? Because if 2 cans of paint cover half the wall, double that to cover the entire wall. Just going back to the idea that if, let's say this is our mural, our wall right here, you throw 2 cans of paint on this wall, it covers half the wall. That was 2 cans of paint. You still need another 2 to cover the other half. That's 4 cans of paint. And we could write that actually as our answer right here, right? It's 4 to 1, right? 4 cans of paint for every 1, or you can just write the answer here as 4. So 2 divided by 1/2 is 4. It's really telling us, okay, how many halves go into 2? Or for every 2, if I need a half, how many will I need for 1 whole? Well, I need 4 for 1 whole. And that's kind of, I think, a different perspective, but it's still a useful one. And we can carry it into all these other expressions. Let's try it out with these other 2 expressions. I think this might help us have a better sense of what's actually happening here. So now we have 2 divided by 1/3, and yes, from one perspective you could say, how many 1/3s are there in 2? Or you can look at this as a ratio. For every 2 that I have, I also have 1/3. The question then becomes, well, if it takes 2 cans of paint to cover 1/3 of the wall, how many cans of paint will it take to cover the entire wall? In other words, what will the ratio be if it's something to 1? And that would solve the problem, right? We want to know what this ratio is in terms of 1. So 2 cans of paint covers 1/3. That means every 3 cans will cover how much? Well, 4 cans will cover 2/3. So we don't even need to think about 3 right now. And 6 cans will cover 3/3 or 1 whole wall. So it would take 6 cans of paint to cover 1 entire wall. So that ratio can be thought of as 6 to 1. And this just goes, again, if we throw up our blank mural, 1 can of paint covered 1/3 of the wall. There are still 2/3 left to cover. So it took 2 cans of paint for this, 2 cans of paint for that other third, and then 2 cans of paint for the final third. It's 2, 4, 6 cans of paint. And last but not least, we have 4 divided by 2/3. And we're looking at this as a ratio. One way to look at it is how many 2/3 are there in 4. Or we can look at it as, well, I can use 4 cans of paint to cover 2/3 of the wall. How many cans do I need to cover the entire wall? Well, if 4 covers 2/3, if I cut that in half, if I divide this by 2, I also should divide this by 2, and I'd find 1/3, which tells me that, oh, if I use 2 cans of paint, that covers 1/3 of the wall. And again, I have to cover 3/3 of the wall, so I need 2, 4, 6 cans of paint. That's 1 full wall. So I can think of this as 6 to 1. And notice these two expressions really came up with the same answer. So again, another way of looking at division is a ratio. And instead of looking at the answer as, oh, how many 1/2s go in 2, keep going with the ratio until you get something to 1, and that something will be your answer, right? That'll be the ratio you're looking for. And we'll practice some more of these.